Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire is one of the most recognized lake destinations in all of New England, and it's one of the strongest short-term rental markets in the Northeast. This investor found a 3-bedroom property right on the water, ran the numbers through a short-term rental analysis tool, and then ended up pulling the trigger with a 25% down payment and a structure built for cash flow. Let me break the entire thing down for you. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another deal of the week. If you're new here, my name is Ricardo Carrillo. I run RC Lending Advisors. We're a nationwide mortgage lending company specializing in working with clients all over the entire US, getting them financing for both residential and commercial deals, whether you're buying your first deal or whether you're scaling your real estate portfolio, whether you're buying here in the States or even if you're buying in Puerto Rico. My team can walk you through the entire process from A to Z. The whole point of these videos is to show you real deals with real numbers about real clients and exactly how they're structured so that you understand what is actually possible when you do this the right way. Now, this property was a conventional investment deal that we did in New Hampshire on Lake Winnipesaukee. And the reason why I wanted to break down this property specifically is because it was a very unique market. The financing structure was somewhat common in how we've done it in the past. And this investor ended up approaching this deal altogether in a way that was actually worth understanding if you're serious about building a short-term rental portfolio. So let's get into it. This property is a single-family home sitting on just a little bit over an acre. It's 2,600 square feet. It was a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom house, and it was a very solid property in a very serious vacation market. 3 full bathrooms is important for short-term rentals just like this, especially on the water, because you can accommodate larger groups who can basically just do things faster, right? So people tend to look for more bedrooms, more bathrooms. They want to be more comfortable. Your goal is to keep the occupancy rate higher and your reviews strong. That's the kind of detail that matters when you're evaluating a property on whether or not it will perform on Airbnb or if it might just look good on paper. Now let's talk about how this investor found the deal. He used a tool called Rabbu, which is a short-term rental analysis platform, kind of similar to that of AirDNA, and it gives you data on projected income, occupancy rates, as well as average daily rates for specific markets and property types. That's exactly the kind of research process that separates normal investors who are just buying and guessing to those investors who are actually buying with conviction. You run the numbers before you commit to say if the numbers make sense, then the deal makes sense. And you understand what the market is actually going to support. You're making a decision based off of actual data, not on hope. Lake Winnipesaukee is a market that supports that kind of conviction. It's one of the largest lakes in New Hampshire and one of the premier lake destinations on the entire East Coast. It draws consistent traffic from Boston, the greater New England area, as well as New York throughout the year, which brings peak demand in the summertime, as well as strong fall season that keeps bookings coming in after the summer rush. Inventory of quality properties just like this in a market like this is also very limited, which makes the actual property have a lot of demand. And so when you have the right property in the right location, it can actually bring in a lot of revenue, which is what we want, right? Let's get into the numbers. This deal was priced at $555,000. That was our purchase price. We ended up doing a conventional style investment loan with a 25% down payment. The down payment came out to $138,000, which brought our loan to a little bit over $400K. We ended up locking in a 7.625% on a 30-year fixed interest rate. At 25% down on a conventional loan, there is no PMI because you're coming in with more than 20% down. PMI is private mortgage insurance, and so you avoid that. But I want to talk about that for a second because the decision between 15% down versus 25% down isn't always as straightforward. It's really just more of a math play because when you're putting 25% down, not only do you get better pricing, but you're also eliminating PMI. And your goal really at that point is to try to get better cash flow from day one and reduce the cost of holding the property long term. Because it's a short-term rental, you're evaluating things like your annual cash flow, and that's where your actual monthly savings comes from because it really compounds over time. Most people tend to choose to put lower down payments. It just so happened that we ended up doing a larger down payment here. It actually put our principal and interest at $2,900. Homeowners insurance came in around $175 a month. And then property taxes was $169 a month. There was no PMI and there also was no HOA. So it actually left our total monthly payment right around $3,200. It was $3,291. But there's one thing in specific that I want to flag about the deal. Buying in New England, because it's not something that a lot of buyers from outside of this area are really familiar with. When you close on a property in New Hampshire, especially a home that uses oil heat, there's actually something called a fuel proration, which comes through to you at closing. And it's kind of funny, but the seller had already paid for the heating. And so that actually still stays in the tank. And because you're now becoming the new owner, when you take ownership of that, the fuel stays with the house. So you end up reimbursing the seller for whatever is left over. And that just ends up becoming a little bit of cash. But in this deal, there's a fuel proration that comes along with city and town tax credits coming through the kind of the last part of what you pay for. It's really a title and escrow thing. It was $1,400 that the buyer ended up crediting back. But it's very small, and that kind of detail matters when you're accounting for every single dollar, but it's something that you would account for in your total closing costs. That brought our total closing costs on this deal to just over $15,000. There was no seller credits, but after the adjustments and other credits, the $1,400 that we just talked about, as well as their $5,000 deposit that I had already paid for, total cash to close ended up coming in at $150,000. That was actually our down payment plus everything. So all in about $150K, not to mention the furniture and the amenities and everything else that was done with the property, which would have costed more. My goal on a deal like this would have been to try to come in with a minimum of a 10% down payment. That would have been massive savings. But let's also just talk about the income side of this, because that's kind of what wraps this whole thing together. Lake Winnipesaukee in peak summer is one of the busiest short-term rental, has one of the busiest short-term rental windows in New England. A 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom property in this area that's well managed and well listed on these platforms could be generating anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 a month during a season like this. You have a $3,000 payment, budget an extra $2,000 all in. I mean, you're cash flowing $5,000 to $10,000 almost a month. And then you have fall season, where it's another strong window that extends past summertime. So the piece here is that people buy in markets like this at these price points because you're going to be driving close to 20% plus of what your purchase price was in annual revenue. That's really always my rule of thumb. The piece there is making sure that your property is going to be driving at least 20%, 15 to 20%, if not more, in revenue based off what you purchased it for. Details like that matter when you're running at these kinds of numbers, because you want to make sure that the deal still makes sense. And I always like to say, if the numbers make sense, then the deal makes sense. And this, having a monthly payment of $3,200 a month, but having an actual, driving revenue of $10,000 to $15,000 a month, amazing numbers on a structure like this, especially at this price point. Now, I'm ultimately not a property manager. I don't live in New Hampshire, but it is very important. And the way that I've seen clients who've listed their properties accurately, made sure they have all the amenities, make sure you have furniture, make sure you have all of the things that people would actually want when they move in. And that's what's going to get you the most revenue. That's why most of my clients actually scale by having a lot of their money tied into the amenities of what people are doing on this. They also use things like Rabbu, which we talked about at the beginning of this, platforms that allow for you to look at different revenue driving factors, just like these. It's also, the thing that we love about short-term rentals is that I say that it's a 3-part return. You have short-term rental cash flow, you have the equity that you're building up every single month through paying down your principal, and then you have long-term appreciation, buying a property just like this on Lake Winnipesaukee, which is, again, one of the markets where quality properties don't lose value over time. They're actually going to increase. You can't build more houses around a lake when you're capped around what's actually there. And so all of those things are working for you simultaneously every single month while you hold this asset. If you want to understand what conventional investment financing looks like for you in your situation, or how to evaluate a short-term rental market the right way before you buy, go to rclending.co. You can speak with me or my team, or you can find me on my Instagram at Richie the Lender. My team and I work with investors all over the country, and we can walk you through the entire process from A to Z. I appreciate you guys sticking around this long. If you watch the entire video, please make sure that you like and subscribe. And if you haven't seen my other Deal of the Week videos, you can click either right here or right here to check out last week's video. I will see you in the next Deal of the Week.